With world-class expertise and local insight, Dexus creates value not just for today, but long into tomorrow.
From Barangaroo Studios, the AusBiz COB is the key stuff you need to know about the day in business and finance.
Hi there, welcome to the COB. Great to be here with you on this Wednesday afternoon. I'm Nadine Blaney.
And I'm Juliette Sarli. And what a relief rally we had continuing today.
Ooh, it is looking pretty good out there, isn't it? Especially when you consider the lead-in that we had from US markets. We've got the CBOE Australia Index closed for business today and up by 0.5%. Maybe a little bit of a waning in appetite toward the end of the afternoon, but I don't want to over-egg it because really positive following on from yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key winners again today was CBA hitting yet another record high. Let's get to those themes of the day. The bank's very much being buoyed by this optimism caused by yesterday's rate cut and likelihood of more. So that rate cut rally, CBA at a record, always going to help kick us along. And then we've got a bit of a fuel fear here in the sense of somewhat of an energy shock too. This has been said before, Nadine, but the fact that US intelligence agencies are saying that Israel is on the precipice of launching an attack against Iranian nuclear facilities, certainly sending a bit of a surge to the oil price.
On edge. Still, you can't ignore geopolitics when it comes to thinking of the investment landscape. And then, of course, we're talking about earnings as well. And just getting to some breaking news, which I think is really interesting. The UK has just had its inflation data come out, rising to 3.5% in April, up from 2.6% the previous month. So I think what that speaks to, Juliette, is central banks are still talking very cautiously, particularly the BOE, when it comes to the pace of interest rate cuts, because there's still so much that is yet to be known about the ultimate trajectory of inflation. And that's a pretty hot inflation read coming out in the UK.
Absolutely. All right, let's get into some of the sector moves today. Kicking it off there with the banks and CBA yet and again at a record high, $174.57.
You see Macquarie there, following up with a 1% rise to $211.08. So let's take a look at energy in the wake of what we have just been talking about in relation to global factors when it comes to the price of oil. Reports Israel may attack Iran, and there's many countries that are getting a little bit more, at least their rhetoric is a little bit tougher against Israel for its latest incursion into Gaza as well. So again, watching breathe through this overnight session.
Yeah, looking at some of these healthcare players today, I mean, we know that Maine was an absolute shocker today on its downgrade. CSL and Cochlear also lower, but a little bit of upside in the likes of Ramsay, Ansell and Sonic Health.
Every time I see Sonic, I think of Nathan Samasundaram, who was pretty positive on it for quite some time, up by 0.6%. Talking about earnings, we did see James Hardie seeing earnings slip 4% to $269 million US in the 3 months to the end of March.
Yes, Gold Road, though, looking good. I had a good chat with Jonathan Takadina from MPC earlier about this. The Treasurer saying yes to the takeover from Goldfields. So Jonathan thinks you won't see too much more upside now. It's pretty much been priced in.
Webjet, the group, down by 2.25%, expanding actively its international markets business. So a bit of an update coming from it and Seek.
And Seek, yeah, that's after it said its full year revenue will be at the top end of guidance. And Caterpillar, I spoke to CEO Will Lopez. They have halved their annual loss to around $8.8 million US.
Yeah, shares there are hitting a record high today. Finishing the session, it looks up 13% to $4.86.
And Technology One, of course, we've been watching this impressive rally, a profit beat. There's been quite a few brokers upgrading their price target on Tech One.
Yeah, so that includes UBS. We've got ARB falling, UBS is for ARB, as it cuts the price target on slowing revenue. So it's got a lot of US exposure. And I suppose you have to wonder how much people are spending up on improving their use and such. I mean, I don't know. How many times can you... I can't speak. My husband loves this stuff. Anyhow.
Main Pharma plunging, though, on that potential deal collapse. Cosette, which had made the bid worth about $670 million, saying, hang on, we don't really like the look of your books.
And Nufarm was one of the worst performers today. It, of course, updating the market as well and downgrading its guidance. So plenty to watch with our extra special guest, Mark Gardner from MPC Markets, so-called MPC Mark. I learned.
There you go.
Don't know if he knows he's called
Why
that.
are we like? Is the Aussie market perhaps outperforming to a certain degree as well because we saw that Chinese rate cut come through?
Yeah,
yesterday?
look, I mean, the major influences really outside the US, China and Australia, and we both got rate cuts yesterday. So, albeit mildly hawkish from yesterday from Michelle Bullock, but look, a cut's a cut, right? So obviously our biggest sectors, really REITs, mining sector and financials, which all benefit from rate cuts, particularly in those two countries. So not surprised at all to see, to see our market up today. And we obviously just playing a little bit of catch up really. And, and those big names, just all the ETF inflows, I think we're moving up to what, 12% compulsory super next year. So the likes of those big sort of top 10 names in the index ETFs are going to have that even more passive bid now. So that's it. It'll help the big four banks, and hopefully we get some upside in BHP and Fortescue and those and Rio and those big miners with China. So that'll lift the other biggest sector in our market. So I think we'll probably potentially kind of outperform for a little bit or be a little bit more resilient, because we obviously didn't go as hard as the US to the upside, and there was a bit of wind taken out of the tech names overnight. Long end bond yields very much at record highs in Japan. Worst bid to cover ratio in their 20-year. I think it's 25-year highs for their 20-year. And interestingly, their long-term bond yields are actually higher than S&P dividend yield, which hasn't happened in 25 years. So we'll probably start to see, Japanese investors in that yen carry trade passively start to reconsider maybe investing in that fixed income back at home, and which may take a little bit of the enthusiasm out of the US market, because it's kind of been the only place they've been able to invest with zero interest rates since the 90s. So yeah.
All right, so that's the fundamentals. When it comes more specifically, stock specific to our market, how much do we take into heed, I guess, of some of these profit warnings? I mean, there's been some huge reactions, and you look at the likes of Maine, for example. Yeah,
Maine was obviously a bit of a shocker. Nufarm doesn't surprise me at all. I think that's a big pickup in efficiency. I think I've spoken about this probably 6 months ago. The new technology that's coming into the farm machinery basically means you use about 75% less of the stuff that they sell. But I think I watched Rabobank economist on Ausbiz actually the other day giving a bit of a good update. Elders results are on Monday, so from boots on the ground that I've spoken to, and farmers are always pretty down, like it's always something wrong, but they're fairly optimistic.
They're expecting a bumper winter crop season.
Yeah, exactly. So, and really only South Australia is massively affected, and we've had rain this week. So I think elders might be really good for earnings next Monday as well. GrainCorp had a bit of a jump up, but obviously part of that Rabo thing was that they're planting less wheat because it's a bit too wet. So that, I think elders would probably be a better play there across the board, because farmers obviously would be buying more of everything, and rural property prices have gone up, and they do insurance and they do property, real estate sales as well. So I think we probably expect a reasonable result from them. Yeah,
well, we spoke to GrainCorp last week, and he was also saying that they're pretty resilient amidst the tariff war, due to the fact that, people need to eat. Speaking of people needing to eat, Wesfarmers as well tomorrow. I mean, that's another stock at or near a record.
Yeah, it's on a valuation perspective, it is eye-wateringly expensive. So I think the results can only, I can't see them matching what the market's got it priced at, and which is no fault of the company at all. But the Mag 7 are basically like cheaper than Wesfarmers JB Hi-Fi by about half.
Yeah.
So
it's an investor update coming tomorrow. It's interesting though, because Wesfarmers was on today's edition of The Call and its technical analysis, and even though David Novak from Wise Education was saying it kills him to say it because he thinks that it's bubble territory, if you look at the charts, you know, the momentum is still in its favor.
And the way that markets are these days with those passive index ETF inflows, I think beta shares passing 50 billion in the last couple of months. And you know those passive flows and that momentum from the systematic trading is, you know, it continues. So things will get overpriced, and you know, if you, because the long-term time frame valuation doesn't really matter, because I think the point that's been made about CBA particularly is, look, it's always going to be fine. It's the best bank in Australia. If your time frame's 10 or 20 years, you probably don't really care that it's overpriced now. Because you're not worried about it until you're retiring down the line.
Can I just ask, because also something that was in the news today was Seek, because it has, you know, guided to the upper end of its previous guidance. We had, was it you?
On the call,
on the call last week, Seek, and everybody was a bit sort of lukewarm on old Seek. Was there anything today that sort of changed your view on it?
I'm glad for the company that they've gone back to the top of guidance, because it has been a bit of a rough period. You know, it's one of those companies, they've got a bit of VC in there, and it's obviously got to come to realisation. I'm a little bit concerned about competition in their traditional space. But yeah, no, that's a really good result, and probably brings it back on the radar again, because it was 2 or 3 years of pretty underwhelming results. So yeah, no, it's, you know, it really probably brought it a little bit back on the watch list, because it historically it was really, you know, quite a good growth company, and it is sitting at a reasonable valuation at the minute. So if they can continue that, it's probably pretty cheap. But yeah, I think we were discussing maybe they should, you know, basically admit that they're maturing as a business and start changing.
How do you? Sorry, I know you probably mentioned it on the call, but for those of us who do watch but just missed that 1 second because we went to the bathroom. How do you find people? Do you go to LinkedIn, or, you know, I know we go to LinkedIn.
We talked about it actually on the call, because I don't know. Well, you were saying your wife even uses.
Well, she does, and the pain I see her go through. But I mean, she's in cancer rehab and mainly physios, so it's fairly. But I mean, I word of mouth first, and then probably LinkedIn. I will do anything in my power to avoid Seek, because the filtering system, you really get bombarded. And as a, you know, MPC's only been around for a couple of years. We don't have a HR department. There's no way I can vet or the what comes in, and most people just hit auto apply. So it becomes, and AI makes it even harder now. You used to be able to vet at least with cover letters. So, but Twitter's getting into the space as well.
Really?
Yeah, but LinkedIn and word of mouth first of all. But yeah, it's a hard thing to do. But it's one area that a lot of the big multinationals have spent a lot of money in AI, and with great success, to be honest. And particularly because they can obviously put the transcriptions of interviews and things in. So that's sort of one space where if they can keep up with technology, I think they'll kick on. But at the moment, it's just you know, you're paying a lot of money to create a bit of a headache for yourself. So, you know, I think it's sort of the last resort. But as I said, they do have those other businesses in there, with VC businesses, which I'm not madly familiar with, but you know, a bit of a pivot from them, and obviously that revenue going up. But you know, it'll probably, as I said, back on the radar.
Yeah. All right, Mark, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much,
worries.
Mark Gardner from MPC Markets. I will just make one comment that I had friends that, you know, similar to us, in word of mouth in the media industry, for example, but that came back after being overseas similarly to me. They get knocked out by the AI thematic, because if you don't have the exact buzzwords sometimes that companies are looking for. Anyway, let's move it along back to equities.
Nufarm, why don't we find out what my expert guests had to say about that 39.5% slump in stat net profit for the first half. No interim dividend either. Michael Gable from Fairmont Equities, David Novak from Wealthwide's Education. Remember, they're looking at the charts on this one.
Well, market clearly doesn't like it. It looks terrible on the charts, and it looks like, you know, the part of their business that was supposed to be the growth driver just not delivering. Longer term, it has been in a downtrend. So, you know, you want to be avoiding those stocks that have been disappointing, that have been trending lower. Very ugly looking chart. I mean, the only way this can start to look interesting is if you get a almost a massive reversal tomorrow and the thing's back above 350, but I doubt it. I think it's just time to move on and find other opportunities.
Given the trend and consistency on the downside, you should have been out of this ages ago, way up the top there. So for those unfortunately holding today, may want to hold for another day, see if it bounces back inside the Bollinger Band. Any bounce, you'd be a seller of this stock.
I'm inspired by that one. Look, we are still watching pressure coming through on the US dollar. We're still watching Treasury yields rise. So it's against this backdrop that we saw our local market outperform today.
Yes, indeed. And once again, a lot of these resource players in particular leading the way. There's Seek again. We just talked about that with MPC Mark, up 7.4%, 23.73.
Yeah, Perseus Mining. I can't see anything other than a buyback, although we're looking at a lot of these gold players favorably right now. Even Evolution is amongst one of the best performers on the day. Nufarm, the worst performer by far. And then you've got kind of a motley crew here with Liontown, HMC Capital, and IDP Education. But James Hardie, really is in the sin bin right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't had the sin bin for a while. There you are, James, down 6% and Hardie to 36.21. Let's have a look at the small end of town. Bougainville Copper.
So Echo IQ has come back online. It was suspended a couple of days ago because it had a little bit of a hiccup when it came to some sort of a reimbursement from the American Medical Association. So I think it was about 32 cents before going into that trading halt. So and then it had sunk quite significantly, I think over 20%. So regaining a bit of that ground today.
All right, and in the other end, or heading the other way, OFX down 13%, Novonix, not a great day there either, and Appen, what's happening with Appen, down 10%.
I can tell you yesterday, OFX, because you weren't here, you're at the RBA, was down significantly, and so this is the second day of selling in the wake of its update. So not good for those invested in OFX over the past couple of days.
Indeed. All right, a couple of Fed members speaking today, including Bowman, but also very importantly is the earnings. So you've got Target, Baidu, Zoom coming through as well.
Yeah, Target is an interesting one, obviously, with the US consumer. And where does it get a lot of its stuff? China. Ding, ding, ding. So one to watch. Global PMIs are due as well on the economic front. Tomorrow we get New Zealand's budget and that investor briefing you were talking about from Wesfarmers.
Yes, indeed. So we will bring you all of that tomorrow, but let's just recap where the market is finishing. So off the highs of the day, we peaked at around midday. I think I peaked at around midday too. Now up by about 0.5% on the CBO 200.
Yes, and looking at U.S. futures right now, both the NASDAQ and S&P 500 E-minis coming under a bit of pressure. I mentioned that inflation data in the UK surprising to the upside. And so that gives you a little taste of what we might be discussing when we meet you again tomorrow morning from 9:45.
See you then.